Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get into our next module. We're on module 13, and this is performance management and implementation. We'll kind of start with the implementation idea first. So the law says, in our example here, all school districts shall implement community schools strategies to improve student-family connections and outcomes. So what actually happens? We have three districts. District A has wraparound services, an on-site health clinic, and a parent leadership council. District B has a few family nights and a new mission statement. And District C hosts a new picture in the lobby. So why do identical policies produce different results? And so that's today's focus for the implementation especially, is there's a complex journey from deciding what to do to actually getting the real world results from that policy itself. So this leads us to the implementation challenge. And this is really why good policies often fail. Implementation is the process of turning policy decisions into actual programs and services. And so the common assumption is once the folks in Washington or the state capitol or the city council decide to do something, they create a policy decision. We think that it automatically happens. That's when the ribbons are cut, or when the signing statement takes place on the news, or whatever, all the glad handing and congratulations go on. But the reality is, once all that politics side of things is over, implementation is turned over to public administrators. And this is where policies can succeed or fail. So a few examples of and for public service. So federal mandate, all states must meet federal clean water standards. States must implement evidence-based reading interventions in kindergarten through third grade. Community schools in all neighborhoods. Court order to reduce shelter crowding within 18 months. Each one of these requires complex implementation activities across multiple organizations. What makes this difficult is its sheer complexity. You have multiple organizations, different levels of government, different types of public agencies across any different level of government. You have nonprofits, you have private contractors, all working together along with governmental agencies. There are different goals and different priorities. So service delivery versus regulatory approach for a different agency, targeted programs, universal access, efficiency versus equity considerations. There are resource constraints, there's environmental factors. And so kind of all of these things lead to this kind of complex interaction of multiple organizations at multiple levels of government working together to try to achieve some simple policy statement that some level of government through a political process put out. So we've thought about implementation for not very long. Kind of only in the 1960s has this really become a kind of field of research, and it kind of grew out of realizing that we had problems. We thought it was just kind of a regular part of administration, but then there was this realization that implementation is really political. There's different actors, they have different interests, they bargain, they negotiate throughout the process, and success is based on building coalitions of people working together to actually get the thing done. Right now, we kind of believe the implementation is programmatic and it's ongoing policy making. Policies are going to evolve through implementation. Remember back in when we first began this class, we talked about the politics administration dichotomy and how kind of early theories from like Woodrow Wilson and others said that politics is separate from administration. Implementation really lets us know that there is policy evolution. There are politics involved with administration. And so that clean separation really isn't a real thing once we start thinking about implementation. So a few examples for some real world challenges. Community schools implementation, right? We started off with this kind of idea of wraparound services, engagement, improved attendance. And the reality of the situation is teachers are trained in traditional classroom instruction, right? You go and learn math from the math teacher. That's what they're trained in. That's what they know how to do. And we measure performance by the test scores. And families can also sometimes be skeptical of extra programming, right? Why do I have to be at school after school hours? School should be over. Why do I have to go back? And there's kind of a lack of clear guidance on partner coordination. And so with programs like this that look really good on paper or look really good to politicians, look really good to some of those people who may support it, once you actually get there and try to make it happen, the thing can just fall apart completely. In implementation, we realize that, and we've been talking about this for quite some time, is that the government and governance does not exist in isolation. Modern public administration operates through networks, federal agencies, state governments, local agencies, right? The standards come from the top. State governments adapt, local agencies deliver, private contractors provide special services, and nonprofit organizations contribute as well. So, a few things to kind of think about when we're wondering, okay, what does successful implementation look like? Clear goals and clear expectations, measurable, specific outcomes, realistic timelines, adequate resources for sure. We've talked about the importance of resources all semester. Engagement of the stakeholders, right? Include them in the policy design, address concerns as things are being implemented, and build coalitions. And adaptive management. When I think about implementation, I often think it's just an experiment to see what works, and you're continuously learning from that process of implementation. And so adaptive management allows us to kind of think about implementing, continuously improving, learning on the fly as it goes, and adjusting where needed. So kind of a success story is 311 modernization. And this is kind of the 311 call center. These things are really amazing. They kind of were initially just, a couple people working in an office with a large book of services, and these things have really spread out. And for the example in the book really is that there was clear goals, there was technological integration, there was management that ensured that all the departments were working together. There was really good training going on. And there was this kind of change of the organizational culture of, okay, we don't do that, to, maybe this is something we could do. Okay, so that's implementation in a brief nutshell. It again is one of the most complicated and real challenges in public administration, just given its complexity, given the number of actors involved, and given the fact that the politicians have done their job and think that everything is okay. And if things go bad, the public administrators are those that are going to take the blame, right? Even if the politicians came up with a really terrible policy, and they were all, agreed to sign off on it and pass the bill or make it a law, it's those who are tasked with implementing it that really determine where success happens or if the policy ends up failing. All right, so performance management evolution. So we often thought about this kind of traditional approach of, okay, so once we implement a policy, let's evaluate to see if it's actually working, right? And now there's this notion of continuous improvement. So a traditional approach to organizations is annual program evaluation to focus on compliance, evaluating things after they're done, and not really providing a lot of feedback on what to do better. And so that's really shifting with performance management of real-time monitoring, focus on outcomes, not just the activities or the outputs that are being done, learning and adaptation, so kind of constant focus on improving, involving stakeholders that have multiple perspectives, and using technology. Performance measurement, what to measure and why. So traditional approach is kind of for public works, for example, would be response times, work order completion, schools would be attendance, graduation, public health, vaccination rates. Modern addition to those things are kind of customer satisfaction, right? Problem solving with community engagement and prevention, equity concerns, and innovative technology use and evidence-based practice. Performance, measurement isn't always perfect. There are ways to game the system. There are ways to take perverse incentives by measuring only some things but not other things. But the solution to those is kind of multiple measures, of really a real focus on not the activities being done, but the outcomes that are achieved, those long-term results, and getting a lot of regular feedback. So continuous improvement is really how we are evaluating and understanding where implementation and our policies that we're implementing, whether it's an organizational policy for how the organization operates, or whether it's an after-school program at a local school, right? That kind of continuous improvement lets us continue to improve what we're actually doing. Let's take a step into the kind of idea around federalism and its role in implementation, because it does require a lot of coordinating across these government levels, right? And when we're talking about federalism, we're talking about vertical coordination, right? There's a federal role, there's a state role, and there's a local role. This can lead to a challenge, right? Because you have the federal standards, and then we also have our kind of local autonomy. So let's use an example for disaster data sharing around like a post-hurricane information sharing requirements. So you have a federal mandate to share damage assessments and unmet needs across agencies. The state needs to coordinate emergency operations, and the local government level needs to deal with data systems and intake procedures of those who have been harmed or hurt or lost property due to a storm. The implementation challenges with that is that there are different technological systems used across all those different agencies at the different levels of government. There's privacy concerns, there's resource costs, and there's kind of the turf wars of cultural resistance to providing data to other organizations. So things that we're trying to improve solutions to these ideas are standardizing data platforms, training, legal frameworks for data sharing to protect privacy, and regular evaluation and improvement through that kind of continuous improvement approaches. So that's one example. Another example here is contracting and public service partnerships. You can pause and read this one for a second if you'd like. And here's the kind of solutions to that previous one. Again, feel free to pause. All right, so the technological change of information, there's a lot of opportunities to streamline things, to improve our decision making through data analytics, right? To expand those boundaries that we have when we talked about decision making through the use of data, communication strategies, and a lot of transparent communication, information sharing, open government programs. So the implementation of some of these things have led to like 311, like we've already discussed. Student information systems, the things that you use, online permitting, and predictive maintenance through kind of data-driven infrastructure repair. As another example from like Public Works. So we can often think, we do face a lot of crises in the public sector, right? And so thinking about the kind of normal implementation process is kind of a slow, steady, methodical approach. You really have to kind of switch things up when there are crisis characteristics like time, pressure, resource constraints, uncertain situations, and there's high stakes. We've talked about some of these kind of examples in the past: multiple alarm fires, natural disasters, major storms, cyber attacks. So you need to have adaptive implementation. You have some pre-planned protocols, but then also be really flexible in how you're deploying your resources and what you're doing, and kind of continuous learning along the way, even in that crisis situation, right? And then there's a lot of after action reviews. Many of you probably are writing something for this class about one of these high pressure situations where we learned a lot from the after action reports. Okay, so performance dashboards. How do we share information about how implementation is going, right? And some of these are through data visualization dashboards, and these will show kind of trend analyses, key indicators, alert systems, and allow for some sort of comparative data. And you can have a couple of examples here from Public Works, like pothole repair backlog by district or area within a city, citizen satisfaction surveys, and a number of others here for permit and licensing. The state of California does a lot of these for its from the district attorney's office through OpenGov in California. Another component of continuous improvement and improving our implementation strategies is what we've talked through about several other times, is kind of this kind of improvement culture, a culture around wanting to improve. And that has elements of regular feedback, evidence-based decisions, support for experimentation, and learning networks where we're sharing experience across agencies. Managing implementation networks, this is a huge area, right? You have those who work in managing in their own organizational structure, and then there's a whole literature around managing across structures, implementation networks. And so the characteristics of these are there's interdependence among organizations, there's diversity among the organizations related to mission, cultures, priorities, there's complexity involved, and there's changing membership and relationships. So there's organizational dynamics occurring. And so strategies for this include clear roles of who does what, regular information sharing, joint planning and collaborative goal setting, and performance monitoring and sharing those accountability measures. Future trends in implementation and performance. So our AI and machine learning for predictive analysis and automated performance monitoring, pattern recognition and complex data, and supporting decision systems. Citizen engagement. Absolutely, the public wants to be more involved in co-production of services, participate in performance measurement, crowdsourcing problem ID through a lot of apps that cities are using all across the country right now, and then real-time feedback. All right, so you want to get out there, you want to be in public service, and you want to implement. What you need are good analytical skills, relationship skills, those soft skills that we've talked about before, and adaptive skills. Be open to change, be open to learning, and be resilient through challenges and other setbacks that you may face. So there's a case study here. You can feel free to pause, take a look at it, and read through. There's also some considerations for you to look at. Think about these as you're thinking about implementation. All right, so we've talked about implementation is where policies succeed or fail. Just because the folks signed the bill, passed the law, it's not automatic. Policy is not self-executing. Modern government operates through complex networks of organizations. Performance management has evolved from just evaluating implementation or evaluating what we're doing to a continuous improvement culture. Technology is creating new opportunities. Federalism really magnifies the challenges of implementation because you have to coordinate across multiple levels of government. Contracting relationships need careful design and monitoring. Crisis situations are their own special animal. Future success, your success, is going to require skills related to analytics, relationships, and adaptability. And for implementation really to be really effective, continuous learning and improvement is essential. Okay, that's it for this one. We'll see you on the next time.